believe we've got Jerry as well.
Yes.
Good morning, Jerry. All right, we've
Morning.
got a few more people logging in here to our webinar. So today we are featuring one of our new vendors that we've just recently launched, and that is MyFloodStatus. We've got Jerry Jones here with us today from MyFloodStatus to kind of talk us through this product. Obviously, living in Florida, the flood insurance has always been a really hot topic, and any kind of reporting that you can get around that is really crucial to a deal. And even more so in the past couple of years, as we've experienced a lot of serious hurricanes and gone through a lot of big storms. And as the maps have changed, this topic continues to grow in importance and affect your deals even more. So we are trying to bring you guys some tools to help you get through those deals and build a bigger package there that you can provide your sellers or your buyers, depending on what end of the aisle you're on. And Jerry is here to walk us through MyFloodStatus and give us an idea of what this tool can do for your business.
Yep. Do you want me to jump in now?
Absolutely. You've got the
Okay.
floor, Jerry. It's all yours.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. We really appreciate being able to join into your organization and help in this realm of properties and storms and the flooding that's happening. I mean, it's amazing how things have changed over the last 20 years. Storms really started with Katrina, and it's just kind of grown from there. A flash flood can happen anywhere. Any date of rain can occur in any place, whether you're in a flood zone or not. But we're experts and trying to assist you when you're looking at properties. And we just had one the other day from, I think it was one of your members had called, and there was a property that they were saying was in a flood zone. And the map clearly showed it was in a flood zone. The whole area was in a zone. But FEMA had issued a regional area of adjustment, and there was no longer any requirement for flood insurance in that section. So the whole area, all the properties have been removed with a revision, a letter of map revision. And you can't see that from any tool that's out there. It's not on the FEMA site. It's not in any place in the site, but we will find it for you and let you know that that property or any property, is it in or is it out? Flood zones are guided by FEMA, and any property, it's not just the property boundaries, but any structure that's in a special flood hazard area, that's what dictates flood insurance. So, you may see on a map, and that's the problem of looking at free resources. The detail is in the eyes in the details to find out what may be happening on a given property. Are you on the correct property? And the view that you can get from the FEMA sites and the free information just isn't everything that you're looking for. So we have a staff of experts that you can call anytime. We can guide you through the process. We are a one-stop shop for getting an elevation certificate if you need it. If you do have one, then we can guide you through the process of getting a LOMA, which is a letter of map amendment that can get a property removed from a special flood hazard area. So, even though everybody says that a property may be in, that's not the end of the game. There are resources and tools from FEMA that can actually remove a property from the flood zone if everything fits the criteria. And we all know that can increase the value of a property. In our report, we have the details from FEMA, exactly what you can
Share a
see.
report for you, Jerry?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you can keep talking. Just give me a second and then I will share one so that everybody can view it at the same time.
Yeah. So yeah, the report what it has is the FEMA sheet, and I guess that's the issue from our standpoint, is that piece of paper, that single sheet is the standard in the industry from the banks and the insurance companies. And that piece of information doesn't really give you the whole story of where that property is, how close it is to water, how close it is to the special flood hazard area. And, is it truly in a flood zone? And sometimes looking at that, if you jump to a FEMA flood site and take a look at the maps, you just can't tell where your property is and is that property in the flood zone. So as you can see, that single sheet of paper will guide you through the specifics. And if you ever have a question regarding, what does this really mean? What is an A zone? What is an AE zone? What is an X zone? What is a 0.20 X zone? Our experts can help you and educate you through that process, and give you an idea what those are. So in this case, there's the form, and as you scroll down, what we do is we identify the property in question and where it relates to the FEMA flood zone. So having that visual aspect, we call it visual verification. One, you're on the right property. Two, you can clearly see where that property is in relation to the special flood hazard area. And then you can get into the details of, is that property in, does that flood zone, actually touch the structure? And there are some nuances there that you have to understand is, from the picture, there's angles of the aerial photography that's going on, so you can't tell in some cases that the actual structure is being affected. There could be a deck on the back. There could be a gazebo in the back that looks like part of the structure. There's a lot of little things that can guide someone to misdiagnose a property to say it's in when it isn't. We have multiple layers of aerial photography from different angles, and we'll even look at the listings of a property to verify what may be in the back of the property. Is that structure connected to the house in any way, shape, or form? Because you can have a deck that comes off the back of the house that's in the flood zone, and if that's connected to the house, as most decks would be, then that would be considered in. Because if there was flooding with velocity, that can rip that deck off the house, which would affect the structure. So there's a lot of cases where we have to look at the details to clearly see what's happening with that given property. So the screenshot you're on now is FEMA issues preliminary maps of what is going to, if there's maps changing in the near future. So this is a preliminary map that shows, so if you looked at the map previous and this one, you can see that there's a change happening in this area, and it happens both ways. It may be affected or it may be pulled out, because in a lot of cases FEMA was wrong in their designating of an area. They got new data from the Army Corps engineers, from that town, from that township's engineers, and they will make changes to the maps to designate if that property could be changing or that area could be changing from in to out or out to in. So those preliminary maps, we can take a look at that and let you know with a pretty good deal of confidence that the status of that property is changing one way or the other. So you can get a heads up to your buyer or seller that something's changing on that property in the next 18 months, and those maps will go through and change. In a lot of cases, you have paper maps throughout the country. There's still hundreds of thousands of maps that are paper in the country, and there's no digital layer to designate what is happening in that area. So what we do is we have those paper maps and we overlay them onto the aerial photography to give you a very close and accurate designation of what's going on in those paper areas. In a lot of the cases, FEMA will have a a digital layer that represents what could be happening in the area, but it's not that accurate. And, the paper map is what is the standard. But they have no way of showing that or registering that in real space. So we're much more accurate than even FEMA is when we get into paper areas. And Florida does have quite a few paper areas, that can affect your properties. Some of the things that, why to use, our services is that we have a $3 million policy on each report that we do. So this takes the liability off of you. When you're stating to a client that, you look this up and you, said it's not in the flood zone or it isn't in the flood zone, we highly recommend you don't say that. You try to keep that to, an expert that you can rely on, and it takes the liability off of you. So our report, we accept that liability. We'll guide you through that process and we'll help you and keep you, out of harm's way in regards to flood zones and reports like this. So, we always recommend that, you don't say in or out to somebody without proof. And with this proof, you can put this on the listing and show that anyone that looks at this property that it's not in a flood zone or is in a flood zone, any designation. So we have certified floodplain managers that will guide you through any questions you may have. You can advise on the next steps when some other source is telling you that that's different information. You can pretty much bank on ours being the standard. We've been doing this for 20 years and we've never had a claim and never had a settlement in the 20 years. So we just get it right. We don't let it go out the door till it's correct. And we just try to make sure that you're covered and you're doing what you need to do for your clients.
So Jerry, do you see this a lot more on the seller end or the buyer end when they're requesting these reports?
It's both.
Yeah.
It's both. The seller, it's especially when you're in an area that, is known for flooding or, and you can just say Florida as a whole, it can be designated at that. So there's question marks when anybody brings up a property and what's going on. So it is both sides, but there's a huge advantage to being able to have this in your portfolio when you're selling a property to show clearly that it's not in a flood zone.
Right.
That's a big advantage, and vice versa. That you're buying a home and you want to know what's going on. Does Florida have any? Because there's been disclosure laws going on all over the country.
Yeah.
Does Florida have a disclosure law?
They're working through some more disclosures for that. I mean, lately they've been more focused on the condos, but they're working towards more disclosures.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
we do right now. They have the seller's disclosure that they can use. But the requirements are continuing to grow.
okay, so that's something that we are working on also, a state
Yeah,
by state front page that would be on the front of our report that would basically fill out the flood section of the disclosure form. So
perfect.
we're looking at as these states identify what they're doing and what it looks like. We're going to add that to our report. So you can just hand that over to the seller because some people just don't know. They're supposed to fill this out and they
Right.
don't know if flood zone's on their property. If they have a many acre property, it's hard to know if flood zone's really touching it in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
So we will be adjusting that as those clearly come out for us to identify, and we'll add it to the front page of our report.
Yeah. So, and I see we have a few questions in the chat, and we actually get it in our MLS department regularly. We've got a lot of agents that want a field that's directly in the MLS that just says it's flood zone A or it's flood zone X, and allowing the agents to just plug that in as you spoke to earlier, it's not so clear cut as saying, okay, well, this property, if we scroll back down to the map, well, this property is in a certain flood zone because it can be affected, by something that, is partially in one zone and another. And can you talk to a little bit about how it's affected dependent on whether that structure is touched, and maybe it's the shed in the back, or it's the house, or it's the porch? And really like the liability for the agents to just plug in the flood zone that they would see on the map.
Yeah, that is clearly it. I mean, if you're making a determination just by looking at what you see from a FEMA site or from a map or from digital overlay that you have access to that's free, there's still so many little nuances that can happen there. As I was stating before, it was, the whole area was red. It was a
Yeah.
special flood areas area. It was an A zone. An A zone is basically a guess from FEMA. There is no engineering behind it. There is no science behind it. They just know from history that there was flooding in that area. They don't know exactly what was going on. They were, designated to put these maps together. So in an A zone, it's a crapshoot of exactly what's going on there. So in many cases, lomas could be issued, map revisions could be issued that change an A zone. So just by looking at a map and saying it's in or out, or it's in the X zone or A zone, is just not correct. And when you're looking at it, if you only have one spot for a designation, there could be 3 zones on one given property. So how do you designate that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to understand what's exactly going on, the ability to zoom in really close to a property and see where those overlays are happening. And like I said, many aerial photography is coming from an angle. You need to look at a couple different angles because that can skew where that actual zone sits, since it's just overlaid over the top. So if a shed or a disconnected garage, but you really can't tell there's daylighting between that garage, and because of the angle, it looks like it's in a flood zone, and when
Hmm.
it's not. So there are many little things that can put the liability on the agent, just because they looked at a site, or were told that it's in or out. Even the town's engineer or the town's assessor or town's zoning officer puts out information that's just not correct.
Right.
And we get it every day. We see it every day, and even from our competitors. There's major competitors out there that their error ratio is 10%. 10% of their determinations they do are wrong.
Well, it's
And
funny
we
that.
overturn that every single day. Every single day. I won't mention names. But
Yeah.
every single
No
day
limit
we
to
get a
10%.
report from an insurance company, from an MLS, from a homeowner,
Yeah.
and it's just they use geocoding to do, because they're at 95% automation. So they
Yeah.
use geocoding that's basically based on the navigation system in your car. And in some cases, they're a mile off for where the property is.
Hmm.
And they use statistics to say that, okay, I have 310 main streets that came up in my system. None of them are in the flood zone, so let it roll. I don't care where they're located.
That's.
But if one was in, 2 were out, they still go run with the statistics and say, oh, that's not in, let's go.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't have an error ratio, because we just don't make mistakes.
Yeah. We had somebody in the Q&A, they said their personal residence had 6 inches that was in a flood zone after one FEMA remapped and found, oh, they fought it and they got a Loma.
Okay. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah, that.
we can get an elevation certificate and a
Mhm.
LOMA from, we have a nationwide network of surveyors, that can get us the, elevation certificate, and then we will, from there, if everything falls into place, we can do an E-LOMA, which only takes 24 hours. But if it doesn't fit all the criteria, a regular LOMA could take 4 to 6 weeks. So just to give an idea of, what that process could take to find out if a property can be removed or not.
Yeah.
Anywhere
And
from 24 hours to 4 to 6 weeks.
yeah, can you kind of give a brief explanation? Because now we have a lot of people saying, what is a Loma?
Okay, it's So if a property is shown in an A zone, as an example, that, you know, the map shows that it's in, and, we can get an elevation certificate, which shows, you know, it's a surveying grade, report that grabs the lowest adjacent grade to, the first floor, where that is in regards to the elevation of the flood zone. So the flood zone was at 10 feet and the grade of the house was at 12 feet, you're 2 feet above grade of elevation, then that property can be issued a LOMA, a letter of map amendment, that will
Mhm.
change the designation of that property to out. And that's, you know, recorded with FEMA. They won't change the map. It takes years for them to do something like that. I mean, 4 or 5 years before an area will be remapped, and then those properties will be changed in a mapping form. But the letter of map amendment is recorded and sent throughout the industry to show that this property is no longer required to have flood insurance. Um,
And
yeah, and we can do that full process for you.
perfect. And I know a lot of our members have already used you guys for, working through problems like that. And they said, I had no idea what I was doing. Made
Yep.
it super easy. And that's the thing, you don't want to dip your toe in the danger waters of trying to be the flood specialist when, that's not who you are. You're the realtor, you specialize in the sale of that property. And when you step your toe into insurance and flood and stuff like that, it can get really dangerous.
It's
Um,
complicated. Yep.
The other question is they're saying for like the example that is on the example report here for where the flood zone kind of creeps through the corner of the property, but it doesn't touch any structure. Does that require the change in flood zone for them to have insurance?
No, no, as long as that red zone, and we have a legend on the map, that clearly shows that what is red zone. Red zone is, I can read it from what I'm looking at, but it's either A or AE zone. And
Mhm.
if that red zone does not touch the structure, and again, sometimes you can't see clearly what's going on with that property. There could be vegetation, trees, leaves, those kind of things. So we have aerial photography that's taken in seasonal. So, there's no leaves on some trees in certain areas. So we can get better views
Yeah.
to what's going on in that area. The 0.2 X zone is not a required flood zone for FEMA. It'll probably change in the near future to be in a flood zone. So this property could change, and then the map below maybe designated that. I didn't remember if we scroll down a little bit. The structure, one more.
One more. All right. This one.
Yeah, so this property is changing. So in 18 months, that green zone is now the AE zone, and this property is changing. So they took that designation of the X.02 and said that, hey, this property, this area has been flooded a few times over the last 20 years, and we're changing that area. So that's what this preliminary map tells you, that at some point in the next 18 months, the designation on this property will change to in, and will require flood insurance.
Okay.
And then the whole area of X.02, the brown area, is still not required, but again, could change in the near future.
Right.
FEMA's remapping, they spend almost 400, between 300 and $400 million a year remapping all over the country. And they can never catch up. Because the maps keep on getting, the storms keep on getting worse.
Uh-huh.
Storms keep on happening, and then FEMA's just playing catch up.
Yeah. We keep thinking, we'll just try to find a couple of years to get a break, and we haven't gotten that yet. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the key factors here is you call us, during normal business hours, you're going to get a person. If you send an email or something like that, we'll probably get back to you fairly quickly. Our hours are from 8 till 8, basically. We have somebody working till, till 12-hour shift, and that's going to change a little more. We're going to be, we're doing a lot more West Coast stuff, so we'll probably be expanding our hours to 8 to 12. at some
Okay.
point. So even if you're working on the weekends or whatever, you'll be able to get a chat or get somebody on the line just in case you have a question.
Perfect. So I
Any
think
other?
we just have two questions left.
Okay.
So the first is kind of a twofold. Do you guys do this a lot? Can it be done for new construction? And with that, the process of doing it for new construction, is that something that the builder can, for a LOMA, is that something the builder can do, or does that have to be done by the homeowner?
Well, in new construction, especially with today's requirements for the building code and everything else, the towns, they wouldn't allow them to build new construction in a flood zone. So if that happens, then, everybody's screwed up. Because, they have to follow the new rules and new regulations and, you're not allowed to build new construction in a flood zone. They have to build it above grade. So a map may show that property looks like it's in a flood zone, but it was built above grade with fill and those kind of things.
So they're doing proper
But-
elevation
yeah,
for
but
it.
if it's new construction, it's not in the flood zone.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be
Um,
rare. That would be rare, but yeah, we can help in that process. A builder, I don't think that they would probably have the right drawings and information for us to, get a LOMA, but I really don't think that anybody can pass through state and local requirements in the new world of construction.
yeah, so they don't need to do the LOMA because that's already covered in the construction process,
Yes,
basically.
yes,
That makes sense.
yes.
Makes sense. The other question is regarding lenders and mortgages, because that's really where all this flood insurance questions come into play. So the question is, would a lender accept this document if they are currently requiring flood insurance, but it is no longer in a flood zone?
Some will. You may have to get that LOMA to prove it.
Yeah,
So, with our document in place, so as shown, we can actually get an E-LOMA, which is only 24 hours from FEMA, and get that processed and have that document. Now the bank has to accept that as flood insurance is not required, but the lender's the lender. They can do whatever they want. They can require flood insurance on a property on top of a
even if
mountain.
you're not in a flood
It's
zone.
it's their money, it's their prerogative. I mean, they won't do any business with anybody, but they can require flood insurance on any property regardless.
Yeah,
So
because that was one of the other questions we have is, why are they telling us that if you're out of a flood zone, that you still have to have flood insurance? And
Yep,
I think, just be like you said earlier, it's Florida, and
yep,
we're seeing a lot of that, unfortunately.
yes. Yeah, I mean, we find a new lender that doesn't require it, or yeah, you'll have to. They're the lender. I mean, it's their money, their risk. They show. There's so much information and studies that say that Florida is gonna be underwater portions of it in 10 years.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that true? Is it fake news? I don't know. Uh,
I
I
guess
would
we will
say
find out.
yes, it's probably true. Because ocean waters are rising, storms are getting worse.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah. And so with, how long you guys have been doing this, have you seen a huge increase in how many reports, especially over the past 3 years, have you guys seen a huge increase in the request of reports that come through?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're up probably 20%, even in a completely down market. I mean,
Yeah.
19, 20, 21 was just a huge resurgence because the mortgage rates were so low, so there was refinances and all that. Everything we do now is nobody refining because rates are too high. It's all just new construction and redevelopment and fix and flips and that kind of stuff. Yeah, but the report level is high, and we're just getting more and more penetration into different markets to get those numbers up because people want to know.
Yeah. So what I want to do real quick, and Jerry, I don't know if you have somewhere you need to be, you can stay on. If you need to hop off, you can. I'm going to kind of walk you guys through to show you where the buttons are in our MLS and how you can access this tool.
Yeah, I'll
And if
stay
you,
on.
yeah, and if you guys have any questions in the meantime, you guys can keep using that Q&A as well.
Right. Thank you.
So absolutely. Thank you, Jerry. Like I said, the flood insurance and the flood topic, it's very, very hot around here.
Love that.
So on your main dashboard, you're going to scroll down to your core tools. You will see that right now under news and updates, with it being a new tool that we just launched. If if you forget anything or you missed anything, you can go through here for the blog post that we have about the new tool and read through that a bit. You do have multiple places where you can access this tool. So the first place is going to be on the dashboard. You've got the MyFloodStatus logo right here that you can click into. And hopefully it didn't log me out, because it times me out the same as it times you guys out, but we got lucky. So this will bring you right to the main page to MyFloodStatus. And what you want to do is make sure, if you're ever going to go to MyFloodStatus, you use the tile through the dashboard, because that is what gets you this discounted rate for being a member with Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association. So you can go through the steps here by clicking order a report. It'll ask you the questions, the address, verify the different information it needs to pull that report and give you a nice turnaround. And again, that is a discounted rate that you get just for being a member of Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association. If you have any questions, you can scroll down. There is a lot of information down here. The example report that we were looking at is right here as well. So if you wanted to look through that report a little closer, kind of see what it is that you're getting, you can click that. It'll open up the PDF for you just like this, and you can scroll through this example flood report to get an idea of what you're getting. And, to the person who asked about if the mortgage company will accept it or not, you could always use this example report and say, if I pulled this report, would you accept it? If we went through this program to get that acceptance, to show that it's no longer in a flood zone or it's above the elevation level, you can use that example for that.
Yeah, and we are accepted across the country. I mean, we've been doing this 20 years, so we have lender acceptance. I mean, there's always new lenders coming in and out. Wells Fargo is the only company that didn't accept our report, because they didn't accept anybody's report except one,
Yeah,
because it was integrated in their systems.
yeah,
Um,
I knew they had their own. That's
and
interesting.
they've dropped out of the residential side anyways, for the most
Yeah.
part. They used to be 30%, now they're 2%.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so you also will be able to view these if you go into a listing. We have a direct link right from the listings. And what this does is it's synced in with Matrix, so it will pull in the address and the information for you. So when you are on a listing such as this one, if you click on the blue button here, the dark blue water drop, it'll bring you right into the MyFloodStatus type, and it'll start the process for you by pulling that address in right here. It'll show it below, so you can click it. It will pull that in and allow you to go through the rest of the steps easily without having to plug everything in, find the property. It just links that right in there for you. It does the same thing through both links. One just, again, pulls in the address for you. The other one, you start the process right from the top looking for the property. So two easy, quick links to get you right to those reports. They've got a lot of great tools out on their site as well. So I suggest you go to your dashboard and you come out here and kind of peruse the site, get an idea. If you've never used any of these reports before, if you've never seen one, it's a really, really good education piece for you as well, whether you're new in the business or maybe you just haven't had a flood zone nightmare yet. It'll help you be better prepared for the future as well. So let me check and see if we've got anything else here for Q&As. Maggie, I got your question about going over the process to find the report. So you've got your two buttons there. If you have any issues finding it, just reach out. You know how to get a hold of us. And they asked if we can get a copy of this presentation. We are recording it and we will have it up on our YouTube channel as well, so that you guys can go back and find this. But again, if you need anything, go to the MyFloodStatus website. The tile's right there on the dashboard. It'll walk you through everything that Jerry just shared with us, along with that example report is right there on the front page for you. All right. think that answers everybody's questions. We appreciate your time today, Jerry.
Awesome, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, you guys. Um, so Jerry, okay, I've got one last question. Jerry mentioned phone numbers and emails for contacts. Where is your contact information if they have any issues?
Um,
Is that on the site here? I feel
well,
like,
there's a chat built in.
okay. And I know a lot of
Mhm.
people have been using the chat. They absolutely love it.
Yeah, and then info@wtgroupllc.com is typically the email to get
Okay.
through. And there's an 866 number somewhere. Yeah,
Okay. Is this the
855.
855?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. So there's that number there, and there is the chat box right there, which is always super helpful.
Yep,
Awesome. All right, you guys. And if you, again, if you have any questions, give us a call or use that number there with MyFloodStatus to give them a call. And we appreciate you guys coming out today for the MLS Monday.
awesome. Thank
Jerry,
you.
have a good day.
All right, bye-bye.